Hi, this is Robert Clickybeard with the Commercial Landscaper Podcast. I'm going to take about 20 minutes of your life to deliver some amazing content from accomplished leaders and business owners to help provide you with great Ironman mindset ideas to help you scale your business to become a better leader and push yourself out of your comfort zone. We have now doubled our audience. We really hope you enjoy these shows and really encourage you to like and share with friends, family members, and your network. Based on my book, The Ironman Mindset for Entrepreneurs, I want to try and pull out one insight you could take back from your business on every single show. And ultimately, my goal is to try and make you less mistakes than I did and make your company more profitable. I'm also super excited to share that finally we've gone live with our digital courses on the Wilson 360 website, wilson-360.com. Cheers, everyone. Hi, this is Robert Clickybeard with the Commercial Landscaper Podcast. Really excited today to be joined by two great people. Kurt Bland, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Robert.
A new friend that I've just met, David Koehn. Nice to meet you, David.
Nice to meet you, Robert.
So, Kurt, I know you've been on before, but we're always grabbing new listeners. Maybe just if you could just go into a little bit about your background, and then we'll switch across to David.
I have been in the landscape industry now going on 50 years. My mother and father started Bland Landscaping in 1976. I was about 6 months old at the time, and I grew up in this industry and made the decision to make a career out of it. Went to college, studied horticulture and ag business, and moved out to California as part of a agreement with my family to get out of the area. I've been back here now at Bland for about 22 years and run the business with my brother. We ended up taken over from my father after my mother became terminally ill about 18 years ago. Actually 20 years ago, come to think of it. So fast forward, we, like a lot of businesses, we started in the basement of my parents' home. We did a little residential, we did a little commercial. Over time, we grew mostly into focusing on the commercial and specifically commercial maintenance. Nowadays, we've been working as a private equity-backed platform for the past 7 going on 8 years. We spent the first 7 years as a sponsored platform with Prospect Partners, and Prospect was a fantastic group to work with. Brian Corbett connected us with them through a process that we did together. All in all, it was fantastic. We were part of a continuation vehicle with Prospect, which is a pretty unusual finance phenomena for people that aren't familiar with it. It's where a private equity fund that has an asset that's performing well, they carve it out of the parent fund that it was in, and they create another fund called a CV, a continuation vehicle, and they give the founding LPs the opportunity to either invest in it or not, and then they bring in outside what are called secondary investors to place capital to redeem any of the LPs that went out of the original fund. And so we, back in 2021, got put into a continuation vehicle with our consent. It was a positive thing because our previous partners at Prospect, they were in the process of redeeming the founding partners of Prospect. And so in order for them to do that, they wanted to sell some of the assets in the fund that was mature, and they wanted to handpick a few of the assets that had a lot of runway, and we were part of that fund. And so we ended up doing kind of 2 turns of equity with one partner. And over 2024, we spent about 6 months going through a process led by Citizens. Robert Womble over at Citizens did a great job for us of putting us through a go-to-market process to talk with a lot of different private equity firms. It was a little different being that we had already had 7 years of experience in private equity. We knew a lot more about what we were doing and what we were looking for. At my age, it was important to me, I'm making the decision that I want to stay involved with this. It was important to me to, find the right partner that was going to give us the runway to do what we wanted to do next with the business and have the right mentality about that. We got really fortunate through that process to find a group by the name of Comvest Partners. Comvest is based out of West Palm Beach. They're a much larger private equity fund. They've got about almost $14 billion worth of assets under management, and we sit in a $1 billion plus fund that is focused on distributed commercial service companies. Landscaping fits in that description. We're the first landscape investment that they've made. The unique part about it was their managing partner responsible for our deal. His name is Manish Chawla. Manish was a partner for 18 years with Prospect Partners. He was on the investment committee at Prospect Partners 7 years ago when we met them. Mm-hmm. And he ended up, he did not have any inside edge or favoritism or anything because we ran a very objective process. But he came to the process telling us, he's like, guys, I know your business. I know you as people. I know your industry. I really want to win this deal. We've been going after some other deals, but like, this is the one I've been waiting for. We said, well, you know, show us proof. And they did. And the exciting part about it is that by becoming partners with Comvest, it gave us the opportunity to think much bigger than what we had been thinking previously. We had focused everything we had done to date on the Carolinas. We're doing more commercial maintenance in the Carolinas than anyone else. We'll do close to $75-80 million this year in the Carolinas. 92% of that will be commercial maintenance. And so we were ready to move into other states. We felt like we had built this team, we had built these systems, we wanted to go into other states. We were trying to be very choosy about where that would be. As we started talking about it amongst ourselves, I said, I've got a friend down in Florida who I've been talking with about this kind of long shot idea of we're going to put a deal together one day. And I said, I'm going to go ahead and reach out to him. And I'm going to explain to him that I'm in the process of raising this new fund of capital, or I wasn't raising a fund, but raising the capital to become part of their fund. I said, let's see what he says and let's reach out to him. And so I did that back in early 24. David and I had been talking for years about the potential of doing a deal. And I had a lot of respect for him and his business and a lot of respect for everything that he was building. And I knew that he was on a long-term growth-minded trajectory. So now, here we are. I don't want to get too far ahead of the story, but all of that is what prepared us to be where we are today, second week of January, having this conversation. So it's been a fun run in this industry for me. It's what I know. It's not the only thing I know, but it's most of what I know. I do know a little bit other than landscaping, but I am a landscaper. I'm a landscaper dyed in the wool. It's a crazy time in our industry right now. I hear so much information, some true, some not true, some people talking out of school about what's happening with private equity in our industry. To be able to sit here and talk about this today and to talk about the story of how David and I came to where we are and why we've come together and what we're planning to do moving forward. I think you'll hear through this conversation that it's a real testament to the positive impact that outside investment can have on companies like ours. I just really appreciate you taking the time to sit here and talk with us about it.
No, I'm excited. I mean, I say that's my goal with doing podcasts, is if we could leave our audience with a few nuggets and how they can build a company and build a future for themselves. I mean, that's basically why I do this. So thank you for that. David, I don't know, maybe start off with the background to your company. Just go through that if you don't mind.
I grew up in Virginia. My father was a Class A contractor who built custom homes. Similar to Kurt's story, after I was in 12, 13 years old, old enough to sweep floors or to pick up wood, I was working for my dad. That kind of led into 14, 15, hey, get on the tractor and smooth out the yards, put out the seed. I started learning how to do the brick patios, the old school masonry way, not the sand set, but we used to actually mortar set pavers and trial them and the whole thing. So I got into the masonry side of things in school. I took some masonry classes. I was good at it. So I did that for my father throughout high school and into community college and got a 2-year degree in industrial technology. Where I grew up in Franklin, Virginia is a very small town. There was just a paper mill. I got the 2-year degree as insurance to get a good job because anybody who had money was from that. They worked at the paper mill. That was really the only industry in the town. It's very, very small. Around that same time, I think it was 1998, there was Hurricane Floyd. And Hurricane Floyd flooded all of our town, flooded the paper mill, closed it down. They laid off like half of the people. I don't know. It was just a lot of unknowns there. So I talked to my dad and I said, I'm going to just pack my bags and move. And he said, maybe you should move to Jacksonville. I think that's a nice growing area of town. So that's what I did. I packed my stuff. No friends, no family, moved to Jacksonville, pretty much, was homeless. I mean, I had nothing. Came down here with $0 and started from scratch. So one of his friends had a electrical contracting company. He gave me a job, let me sleep on his couch for a little while until I was able to save up enough money to get my own place. Got my own place, got into the electrical trade. Probably a year and a half, 2 years into that, they wanted me to join the union. I decided I did not want to do that. My roommate at the time had a small landscape business, mowing lawns on the weekends. I started helping him, realized I was pretty good at outdoor work because that's what I grew up doing. Again, went back to dad and I said, hey, I want to start a lawn mowing company. I'm going to do it just like my buddy. I'm going to do it on the weekends and I'm going to keep my job. My dad said, look, the only way I'm going to help you start this business is if you quit your job because business is full-time. Business is not part-time. And that was probably the best advice I'd ever gotten. He was like, if you're going to do it on the weekend, it'll become a side hustle. It'll always be a side hustle. He ended up loaning me $12,000. In this process, digging through all of my boxes of receipts, I found my original $12,000 promissory note, which really was really amazing to just think back and to, the caliber of where our company is now, and to think that it started with a $12,000 loan from my father to buy lawnmowers is truly incredible. But I'll get into the business. Just kind of wanted to paint some prehistory of how this thing started.
Love that. Great story.
Yeah. So we get going. I get started residentially, grow the residential side up to, several hundred residences, and then decide to sell that once we started focusing on commercial. So I sold off my just residential and then started focusing solely on our commercial accounts. At the time, when we first got into the business, it was just cutting edge lawn. There was 1,000 cutting edge lawn, cutter's edge, cutting edge, cut this, cut that. So as we started to gain some commercial traction, I decided to change the name to DM Koehn Landscaping, which is my initials and last name, and really just kind of say, hey, Koehn's our name. That's what we're going to do. Let's move forward. So built the business organically, stride by stride, hard work, sweat, determination, tears, grit, you name it. Anybody who has started a landscape business from scratch and has grown it to even just over $1 million understands the grind that is. I grew the company very steadily, made a lot of mistakes.
We all do.
So made a tremendous amount of mistakes along the way. Eventually, I was up into about the $4.5 million, $5 million range of sales. Being that my background was construction and my dad was a builder, I gravitated to, of course, the installation side. So if you rewind back about 5 years when me and Kurt met, I was doing that 4 or 5 million, but a lot of it was construction. Not very much of it was maintenance. I was probably 1.5 million maintenance, 3 million construction, and some irrigation work, things like that. Kurt and I had some conversations about enterprise value, what that looks like, the opportunities of equity and partnerships and things. Around that same time, I was also reaching out to some consultants. They helped me unwind the construction division and focus solely on commercial landscape management and maintenance. They were a very integral part in me enforcing Kurt's plans and ideas that we would jump on the phone and, like he said, we would just talk for. I remember sitting on my back porch and I'm like, holy shit, I've been on the phone for an hour and a half with this guy. That's amazing.
And we had met over LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's not like, we had a formal introduction somewhere. I remember David reaching out to me and said, man, I've been doing this a long time, but I don't feel like I'm making the progress that I should be making to create value.
We had some good dialogue back and forth about how to really truly build value in your company. Not all revenue is good revenue. We restructured some things. We slowly worked our way out of our backlog of construction. We really focused on building more relationships and diversifying out of just apartments and hotels and smaller things into larger HOAs. As I started to get a little healthier, a little bit more profitable, I was able to start, really reaching out, got involved with the Grow conferences, got involved with Elevate and ELP, started reaching out and talking to anybody that I could learn from in this industry. And those events motivate you to what's really out there. I think that when you're a younger, ambitious, hungry entrepreneur to go to these things and realize that there are 50 million, 100 million, $200 million companies, as a country boy who grew up in a town where nobody had that kind of size business, it really opened my eyes to what was possible in the landscape industry, and really just kind of started to drive our focus, and then hired a full-time business development person who came in, and he kind of helped us with some of our media. He helped us with some of our marketing. We ended up working with someone to help us create content for social media. And we really just started just trying to evolve every way possible, structure and overall general business to personal training to some of my team. So Will Cruz's he was our director of operations, who will be now the branch manager for us in Jacksonville, and certainly has the capacity to grow beyond that. But they started training our account managers, one-on-one, started going to different things. So we were going through all of those transitions. Then we had to incorporate Aspire. We incorporated all of the different things that you see as far as technologies and things. And in a lot of Kurt and I's conversations, he would really kind of reference like, wow, you guys are built out to be that $15 or $20 million operation. We're right at 10 million in sales in 2024. So we purposely kind of pre-built the foundation because, again, my goal was to be 20 million in sales in the Southeast in the next 5 years. That was our goal. So we have some resources and some key individuals in leadership that some companies our size wouldn't have, and we're thinking about things differently that some companies our size wouldn't think about. Chase Mullins, another mentor of mine, who I speak with regularly. Joe Cellini down in Tampa at ASI, met him. We both were on a FNJLA board in Tampa. He invited me in when Frank Ross was at his place. So I've had so many people in this industry who will just share advice. It's really amazing that, pick up a phone and call, and you'd be surprised how much information you can get. So I always thought the peer groups were too expensive. So I just decided I was going to be ambitious enough to create my own. So I would just call and ask a bunch of questions. But the way that Kurt and I came together is really, it's the timing of it, the structure of everything. It truly was incredible. And then the time that Kurt and I've had together, there's a flow, as he said, into the way we think about things, the way I think our brains work a lot alike. I know I'm kind of on the
we've both got ADHD and have
so we're both wired very similarly. Kurt has Matt, I think, to kind of offset. I have Will to kind of offset on my end, and there's a very much a lot of alignment in being visionary, forward thinking, and what's next. So when I had the opportunity to really think about what a partnership would look like with someone, there's so many equity partners in this industry that for the last probably 2 to 3 years, I've been getting emails every day from every private equity company that you can think of. And I've just constantly said no. And a lot of it's from my involvement in the different associations and things. With Kurt, it didn't feel like I was selling our company. It felt like I'm being a strategic partner to help create something that's going to be outstanding, which was always our goal, was just to create a good product and for us to be a force to be reckoned with, to dominate a market, and then to see what they've done in the Carolinas, the energy that Kurt and I have just aligned to where I didn't want to look for any other equity partners. I wasn't going to say, all right, take me to market. I'm going to try to get a better deal or this or that. It was nothing about that. It was a divine thing because we planted the seed 5 years ago. We kind of watered it, and next thing you know, we're sitting with you, Robert, and telling the world about it.
Story. No, that's awesome. I love it.
I remember last what was it, May or June? When did you fly up to have dinner with us? Do you remember what?
Yeah, it was probably end of July, maybe.
End of July. Okay. That was longer ago than closer.
Yeah.
I remember saying to David, I was like, David, just come up and have dinner with myself, members of my executive team. I think it was Joe, my brother, and myself. And I said, just come up and have dinner with us. I want you to see who you're talking to. He came up. We booked him a flight up here and picked him up at the airport, whisked him off to dinner. The next morning, picked him up early at the hotel and took him to one of our branches where our Durham branch was hosting a semi-annual safety training day. We do these twice a year training events and shut down for safety purposes and go through all this. And I said, David, just come with me. Just come, just watch, talk to people, ask them whatever question you want. If they ask you why you're here, just tell them you're a friend of mine that wants to see how we do training, and let's explore this. And I said, no holds barred. Talk to anybody you want to, ask them anything you want to. And we spent that morning over there in Durham watching the team get ready and do their training. And we stuck around as they had their lunch. And I remember driving David to the airport and saying, I know you're not ready yet, but if this shows you what we are, and gives you some insight to what you would become part of, then if we can make this happen, and if I can look at this deal in a forward-looking manner, because David had made a lot of forward-looking investments that he wasn't getting credit for.
Right.
It was negatively impacting his EBITDA, frankly. And so in our case, we had to look differently at the value creation model for what he had built, because, admittedly, he had a business that had the overhead of a $15 million company.
Right.
And he was okay with that because he was saying, look, I'm investing in my business. It's going to take this to do it. And he was right. And meanwhile, I was thinking to myself, well, I need a company like that to be able to penetrate Florida, because we're going to have an HR presence. We're going to have a regional finance person. We're going to have a sales team. We're going to have a structure. And so as I was thinking about it, buying a company that had those things baked in, we were able to look beyond the results as they stood on their own. And we were able to model those results to say, this is what this business will perform at and look like if we either adjusted for those things or we just infuse the growth to get them to right size the model. Otherwise, if we had bought a company that didn't have those things, we would have had to have hit the ground on day one trying to figure out, what are we going to do about sales? What are we going to do about HR? Are we going to have an administrative presence? He solved all those boxes. He checked all those boxes, solved those problems. And with David's personality, it was a common sense decision at that point. But what we had to do was we had to figure out how to bridge that gap.
Right.
Because there was a gap. And, it was a matter of, David, I've got to figure out how to pay you the fair price for your business that it should get. And, my attitude about these things is, I'm not in a negotiation with somebody to try to squirrel them down on price. If their numbers support a higher price, it's in my best interest to pay them a higher price, because that just adds accretively to the value of what we are building, right? And so fortunately, I had partners that they trusted me. 7 years of working with somebody is a long time. And we had done 8 previous acquisitions. They trusted my judgment. Those had all gone well. And I said, guys, look, I'm going to have to break all the rules to make this work. Add to that the fact that we were in the market. we were out there in market. And so I was transparent with David and said, listen, I'm simultaneously raising the round of capital that's going to fuel what you and I are dreaming about, while trying to negotiate this deal with you, and while trying to also make sure that I'm not writing a check I can't cash. Because at that point, we didn't have a partner picked out. We were talking to, in July, we were talking to dozens of private equity firms. Yeah. And so I'm sitting there telling every one of them, they're asking you, well, what kind of deals can you originate? And I'm like, well, I'm kind of in a precarious situation because I have a deal that's in motion with a person that trusts me infinitely and I trust him infinitely, and I can't screw this up. And if you're going to be my partner, you've got to be willing to back me up on this. And I realize you don't know me, but you got to trust what we've done under Prospect's tutelage for the last 7 years. You got to trust the track record that we're bringing from 49 years. And you got to be willing to take a little bit of a leap of faith in the fact that I'm asking you to close our deal and in less than a month, close another deal with a person that you haven't met in a state that we don't have a presence in.
That's a tall order. Right?
Oh, it was a tall order, Robert. It was a tall order for sure. It was a very tall order. But it also required equal complicitness and understanding on David's end, because I was fully transparent with him. I'm like, David, I'm making promises to you that, hell, I got to make sure I can keep them. And if I can't, then, shame on me, the deal won't go through. But for us to do this, I have to simultaneously manage your expectations and sell this idea to the next partner, and I don't even know who they are.
Right.
And so some of these folks, as we would sit there and talk to these, $1 billion+ private equity organizations coming from, you name the financial hub, they came from there. They're sitting there saying, well, how do we know this is really going to work out? And I say, well, you don't, but you don't know if any of this is going to work, right? And I would also say, if you don't trust me on this, you're probably not the right partner for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Because my instinct and my experience of doing this tells me that this right now is the most important deal that we can pursue. I need you to have that same faith in a man that you haven't met, in a state that we're not in, so that we can make this happen. And if you can't do that, I probably can't choose you as my partner.
Right.
Luckily for us, and luckily for everybody involved, when we got down to the 6 or so finalists that we had, every one of them was like gung-ho. And by that point, I'm telling David, I'm like, David, okay, I got 6 people that are gung-ho, or 6 firms that are like gung-ho. We've narrowed it down. We had immense interest, the whole process. I think we talked to around 100 PE firms to begin with.
Okay,
Narrowed that down to 6. And so these 6, though, they understood from what I'd been saying to them how important this was. And so, I mean, honestly, even the day that we closed, David and I were just kind of licking our wounds a little bit about what we had been through together. And as we're sitting in David's truck doing the closing call, David looked at me and said, Kurt, I just want to remind you that look what has happened here. You've had all this going on with my deal while also doing your own deal. Man, I get it. Like, I know what I've been through. I can't imagine what you've been through. It has been, of the 9 deals I've done, I've never done anything like this. I promise you.
I was going to say, yeah, that's why I'm really happy you're on the show, because, there are very few people that have gone through this before. Ask you a quick question, David, then a couple of comments, and back to you for a quick question, David. Just for the audience, I think you mentioned you did 10 million back in 2024. What did you end up? What was your makeup in terms of percentage, construction, maintenance, just a number of employees, just so that the audience know the scale of your company?
So we were pretty much all, when I say all, I'm saying 90% maintenance. Commercial landscape management is our main focus. So, over that time, we were able to phase out of the construction completely. And we have not performed construction install in over 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. So we were able to pretty much work ourselves through that and then focus solely on our relationships, building our relationships with management companies, building our relationships with apartments and industrial sector. We do a lot of, some of the large Amazon facilities and different things here. So we really just went after the maintenance. So when you work, if you were to break it down, we're probably 80% maintenance, and then you're going to have another between enhancement and irrigation and sub services with your horticulture and things like that. So if you were to break it down into those buckets, probably 70-30. So
he, by definition, though, Robert, was 100% recurring and they had, and that was one of the reasons that was so compelling to us, was they had 0 work that was not tied to an existing customer.
That's nice.
That reoccurring balance that they had, as far as I'm concerned, it's 100% maintenance, because thought process, I lumped that all in, it's all maintenance driven.
Yeah, and that's 100% true. And that was part of the, for us, that was just a percentage of revenue, but all of the revenue was driven from contract work only.
The 2 big takeaways I want to make sure I emphasize to the audience is, investing in yourself, investing in your team, using outside resources is really important. The fact that you were out there, you went to Aspire, you joined different industry associations, you brought in other consulting firms. So there's so many companies or owners I come across that they think they know everything. They stay within their own little bubble and they never expose themselves to outside, influences. So, and people say, I'm too busy to come to a conference or something, but there's so much you can learn from that, whether it be the network or the people or just some nuggets you pick up from attending conferences or training classes or something. So nice job with that. And then the second thing is, again, I see so many people that they think about selling or partnering, and then there's something that happens, and then 3 or 4 months later they actually sell. Where I'm always a big fan of see who's out there, pull together your deal team, explore who the potential partners are, a year, 2 years, 3 years back, so you can have dinner, you can see who'd be a potentially good partner for the future. So again, credit for you for doing that. And, I love, Kurt, how you actively go out and you talk to company, you build relationships, you start off with your LinkedIn, you follow up with calls. Every time I visit somewhere, oh yeah, I know Kurt. So, You do a great job of doing that. And then I suppose my final question for this part, what was the tipping point? You obviously had invested in some good overhead, some great people. You've been training and developing your people. So you could have easily scaled it, grown it yourself. Yeah. But there must have been some type of tipping point that, well, no, I need to partner with Kurt and his team and what he represents.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't necessarily a certain tipping point. I think that knowing how challenging it would have been for me to try to enter a platform myself. I think that the pressure of just the industry in general, when you're family owned and operated and you're a regional, Northeast Florida regional based company, but you've got every single competitor who has already partnered or has equity backing, for instance. So in our market, there was a handful of local competitors, and they would just slowly one by one. And we used to always kind of proudly say that, like, hey, Koehn's the last one. We are taking this thing to 20 million. We are not bringing in equity. We're going to do it ourselves. I think you get to a point where, not to say you're over leveraged, but you've got a lot of overhead. And what happens is you're pricing yourself out of the market. So we were very proud of our work, and we would really challenge the price model. So we were trying to push commercial maintenance to 52, 53% gross margin. With the amount of overhead we had, and then trying to get 53% gross margin on maintenance work, our pricing was on the higher end. So there's a handful of customers that understand that, hey, we're going to pay more, we're going to get more. When you really go after the $500,000 to $1 million jobs, what we noticed is our closing rate started to diminish as we hit $250,000 to $300,000. So we would look at our competition, who are all equity backed or big bank, Yellowstone, Brightview, Yardney, you name it, all the big guys that are out there. Their pricing models were so much more aggressive, and they can spread that cost around because of the branch model and because of the buying power and the other things. So the thing that really intrigued me was I could see myself working with Kurt and Matt as a team. It wasn't like, hey, I have had, again, several other people interest. I just never was able to get that kind of feel or connection, like, hey, because there's always that negative stigma. Private equity is going to come in, they're going to strip the company, they're going to strip out the resources and then just make it as profitable as they can. So there's already so much equity in Florida that it took a lot of buyers out of the market for me, because I didn't want to do business with somebody who was already in Florida. Because if they had an office in Orlando, for instance, if I would have partnered with Yellowstone or sold to Yellowstone, they would have stripped my business. They already have the resources and the leadership and the key things. And I love my team, and I'm very, very generous when it comes to their benefits and their things. And these men and women helped me build this business over 20 years. I wanted to make sure that whoever I bring in to take this to the next level is going to be someone who has the same culture, but also just the same integrity when it comes to how they treat their people. And you go back to when I was in Durham, and I can just see the level of respect that the Bland team has for Matt and Kurt and their management. And when I was there, it felt like I was at my own office. I felt at home, if that makes sense. So that was it. Is this a group that I could see myself being a part of? No offense to any of the other guys that are probably all listening to this podcast that have reached out that I've turned away. It's just, again, I think what the Bland team has been able to create in the Carolina markets is so inspiring and so amazing to see that they've just become such a dominant force. You take 50 years of experience. And the other part of it is, like Kurt mentioned in the very first of this thing, we're landscapers. I'm a blue collar guy. I grew up in the woods. Me and Kurt could have a beer and talk all day long about this and a childhood. And there's just a connection there to where I'm not going to go to work for somebody where the CEO's a banker or the suit and tie type guy. Like, the numbers are great. All of that's fine. But knowing that the leadership of Bland and the experience that they have and just the relatableness, you know what I mean? Like, is really what drove it for me, was just the simple fact that I still get to take my team to 20 million. I just now can do it in...
You're taking them to 30 million.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's going to be more than that now. I thought it was 50, Kurt. Exactly. So, and, for me to be able to provide the opportunities of growth for my team, I think that was really it. You look at the guys that it would have took me 5 years to get to 20 million. and I still wouldn't have had regional positions. I still wouldn't have had some of the opportunities that we're going to have in 5 years for some of my team members. So I'm looking at this as an accelerator for my team. And it really was it was just a win-win. Everybody does the pros and cons list, and there was very little cons and a tremendous amount of pros. In business, you have to be decisive. And that was one thing that I didn't want to be indecisive with this and miss out on a lifetime opportunity.
How did your team take it? How did you sort of break the news? How did you sell it? Because that's always it used to grind at me when I was in the process of selling my business, and how am I going to tell the team I've been promoting them, I've been doing some great things with them for years, and now I'm suddenly, selling, and some people might see it being selfish. But so, what was your sales pitch?
Kurt and his team were there. We made it a pretty family-friendly type environment, cooked some food, and I think a lot of my team was prepared in a certain sense just because they know how this business works. And a lot of them have already been through transitions with other companies. Some of them had already witnessed the upsides of this. So it wasn't tremendously a overly emotional sell. I got up and just shared a little bit about where we started, how we got to where we are, shared the story of how Kurt and I know each other. So again, I think all of that, I think them knowing, one, that I'm still here and I'm not retiring, I'm not going anywhere. You're getting in the same truck, working with the same crew, doing the same job. Kurt is somebody that I've known for many years. They trust me. They trust my judgment. So immediately they're going to trust Kurt. So it went very smooth, in my opinion. I haven't done many of these, so Kurt may be able to speak on it versus some of his other transitions.
David did some really smart things by, firstly, I went down to Florida. What was that, late August or early September? I came down to visit you guys. I went down to Florida early in this process. Some people would say too early. I will go on record as saying there's no such thing as too early, because if you're thinking about doing this and you're one of those people that's just going to wait till the very end to spring it on everybody and not even leak out to your top team that there's the potential, be careful. I've seen that backfire on people. I did that myself, not saying it's the right way to do it. It worked for me. I had a very unusual circumstance. David allowed me to come down to Florida before we really got into the hardcore. Like, I had given him a range and I'd said, I can get to here, right? Because he and we had numbers that we were working towards. And it was a team effort to get there. And I think David will back me up on this. Like, at no point was this, well, David, this is the best I can do. And David's like, well, that's not going to get me there. And I was like, well, tough shit. Like, it was a matter of, David, here's what I can do. And David's like, well, you're close, but let me share my thoughts on this. And it was an iterative back and forth. And once we got to an acceptable value range for both of us that we could both live with, David allowed me to come down and spend a few days in Florida with he and Will Cruz. And Will, when you hear this, you made a hell of an impression on me. I think the world of that guy. Will has been with David a long time, 15 years. He's a grinder. He's just a heck of a leader of men, is a good way to say it. With Frank Prosciutti, David's head of sales. And Frank, when you hear this, thanks for the opportunity. And I spent 3 days with those gentlemen. We went to dinner the first night together, and then I spent most of the next day with them as a group. And then David said, Kurt, I'm going home. This was like 5 o'clock in the evening. He said, I'm going home. You and Will are on your own. You guys figure out what you're doing for dinner. I'm going to go pick up my kids. And Will and I sat down in his office and had a what I would call a who's going to give in first session. And I will tell you, don't get into that session with me or Will. Will and I stayed in his office until 11:30 that night. We had no lunch, or we had no dinner. Yeah. We had only had a salad for lunch that day. We were both running on nothing but pure adrenaline and passion. And Will opened up to me that night in a real personal manner, and I opened up to him, and he's like, listen, I'd do anything for David. I'd walk in front of a car for David. I got to build that same level of trust with you, and I've got tonight to do it. And we sat there and we just talked. And by the time we left that conversation, I looked at Will and I was like, well, your wife probably doesn't like me because she's been calling you all. And we're both freaking starving. You've got to get up, because Will gets up, like 4:30 in the morning every morning?
Yeah, 4 o'clock every day.
And so Will's like, I'm getting up in 4.5 hours to lift things. And I remember Will dropped me off at my hotel in downtown Jacksonville. I was so hungry, I was lightheaded. And I walk in, there's no attendant in the hotel, but they had a little pantry. And so I go and I find a cup of noodle soup and I put it, I put that on the counter at the hotel. I stood at the hotel counter for 10 minutes. Nobody, I'm like knocking on the door, like, somebody come help me. I'm starving. I need this cup of noodle. Finally, admittedly, I stole the cup of noodle soup because nobody would come take my money.
That's awesome. Which hotel was that, Kurt?
I travel a lot with Marriott, and so does my wife. So I don't feel bad about taking that. I mean, I tried like hell to pay for the soup. I got back, I got up to my hotel room and I heated up the cup of soup in the microwave and reflected on the day and thought, all right, you got to get to bed because, we're starting first thing tomorrow morning again. Hit it that day and spent the day with actually David and Will and Frank all came to my hotel room and we sat in on one of Bland's executive meetings. He and Will and Frank got to sit and watch an unfiltered interaction of our entire leadership team from the branch level up. They got to hear the good, the bad, everything. I explained to him, you may hear things I don't want you to know, but you're going to hear it. Then after that, I spent the day with Frank. He explained to me his passion and his drive and all this. And so when I left Florida after that visit, I had conviction that he had a team that was capable of going through what we were going to put them through. I don't make light of this, right? This is making sausage. David's heard me say it a million times till he doesn't want to hear it. I learned this from Sam Lang that used to own Fairway Green. Sam was a major lobbyist for our industry before he sold his business, and he was a mentor to me as a child. Sam, when I was in my early 20s, looked at me and he was asking me to go with him to Capitol Hill to talk about something political. And he said, Kurt, I'm going to let you in on a secret. Everybody loves sausage, but nobody wants to see it made. And son, we're about to walk in to see where it's made. That's become a quote that I use in this process a lot. It's real sexy to sit and talk about the aftermath of what happened. And it's sexy to talk about the multiples and the payout. But the part that people don't talk enough about, this is a difficult process. It is a painful process. It is going to test everybody's commitment to your organization. It's going to test your own ability to process a lot of things at a really fast pace that you're not used to dealing with. And so it's been, that opportunity to sit down with those guys allowed me to go back and then consult with my executive team and my finance team and my partners and say, listen, we can genuinely justify making this kind of investment into this company because I've had firsthand exposure to the people that are going to end up having to deal with it when it's done. And y'all, sorry, my Labradors just came in here. A little wrestle session. That early exposure, while some people on the transaction side and especially investment bankers, they would all say, no, keep him at arm's length. Well, I'll tell you, if I'd been kept at arm's length, we couldn't have done this deal. Because if I was kept at arm's length, I wouldn't have known who Will Cruz really was. I wouldn't have known that Frank was a capable salesperson that was going to be able to drive results. I wouldn't have known that David was genuinely situated in a market that he had a dominant position in with a great location and that he knew his market because the 72 hours that I spent with David, Will, and Frank driving around the greater Jacksonville area, it made me go home to North Carolina 110% convinced that we had to do this deal. This was the one deal that in Jacksonville we wanted to pursue, and there was no option in my mind. That created a tremendous amount of enterprise value for David because at the end of the day, when I'm doing a deal, I'm the one that has final sign off on value. Right. And I've got to be able to underwrite it, and I've got to be able to get my team to support it beyond just the underwriting. I do most of our M&A deal work and origination, not the grinding part, but the negotiating part and the frontward facing part, dealing with people like David. I also have to then be able to have hands-on proof. I'm putting my name and my money and my company at stake whenever we do this. And so I share that part because if David hadn't let me in to see behind the curtain what was happening, I couldn't have had the conviction that I had. And then further to that, what it did was it allowed David to, over those next few weeks, have conversations with Will and Frank in which he could explain to them, guys, you spent time with Kurt. You see what I'm talking about here. This is a person that you will be working with indirectly. Admittedly, the day of closing, I explained to everybody I probably won't see him again until March. But the cadence of this business is a reflection of who you just talked to. And I wasn't there when David was having these conversations. That was David and Will. That was David and Frank. I was not part of it. Too many times, in my opinion, the investment bankers hold that back from a very qualified, very serious buyer. And I understand why. I've been on both sides of this. It's a necessary thing in a lot of situations, but that is genuinely what is so unique about this particular scenario. David did have representation. He ultimately ended up bringing in Jeff Harkness to represent him in the process. And it was a real pleasure to work with Jeff and his entire team through the process, because I would rather somebody have representation than not when it comes to the deal itself, because the lift that occurs is so heavy to go through due diligence. Negotiating terms is a piece of cake, relatively speaking.
Right.
The due diligence that gets you to closing, that's a 90+ day process. We do it very efficiently. We did I don't know, David, if you counted days. I didn't, but we were damn close to 90.
Yeah.
We might have been under 90.
That's great.
That is a big deal. By the time that we got there to do the closing, because these are asset deals, you have to announce the closing, do the closing, and hire all of the employees within a matter of hours. And so by the time that we showed up in Jacksonville with our HR team, onboarding team, executive team, David had already told some key employees in the company. 2 of them, other than David, had met me. Others were brought into the fold in the days leading up to it. By doing that, as I like to explain to people like Will when they're in these scenarios, when David goes out there and says, I'm making the decision, or I've made the decision to sell my business, and we're going to partner with this new entity that you're not familiar with. When that gets announced by the seller, the people in the audience are going to break eye contact with the seller, and they're going to immediately look to their left and to their right. They're going to see how the person beside them is reacting. And if they look around the room, and Will Cruz is just, again, such a leader of people, that if they look around the room and Will, cool as a cucumber, and he's sitting there nodding his head saying, guys, I promise you, this is going to be good for you. It's going to be good for me. It's going to be good for all of us. It's good for David. It's fair for David. That is a game changer. If someone in Will's position that's respected as the leader of the team, if it's a surprise to him and he's sitting there saying, holy hell, David, like you just dropped this on me in front of everybody, and his reaction is one of panic, well, guess what happens to everybody else that looks at him?
Oh, for sure. No, that's a great point. How much did Frank and Will know when you met them, and what were some of the conversations they had with you after Kurt left? What were their biggest concerns?
Will's one concern was simply just the fact that after 15 years of building my trust, because he's the first one there and the last one to leave, and has been for quite some time, I think the fear of the unknown was that, hey, do Kurt and Matt realize what I do here? When someone's really that driver of the business, and I'm the more visionary sales, I'm not at the office that much, and that operator is really driving the business, there's so much value in that person. And I always took very good care of Will and still do. And so that was the one fear. Anybody who's been through this, who's listening, knows that post-acquisition stress of the implementation. No matter how squeaky clean everything is, you're going to have issues. You're going to have, we've got to scan all the computers. We've got to get emails. We've got to get Boss. We were on Aspire. Now we're going to Boss. So you've got things that have to get done. And like Kurt said, everybody goes to him. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? So there's just a tremendous amount of pressure. And I am beyond grateful to have a strong leader that can have that amount of influence to not only keep everybody calm, but try to kind of rally them about the things. But that was his one fear, was just simply not having the same comfort level. And then he was very, very, very into the numbers and involved with our consultants. So he had his purpose, and his why was, hey, we're going to hit our numbers. And we're going to do it was always 10% net a year. And it was always whatever our number was. He was very goal driven, very oriented.
Let me interject something on that comment there too, David, because when I sat with Will in his office for the 6 hours that we were there that evening, I didn't know before I sat down with Will exactly what he was responsible for. I knew that David had explained to me that Will ran the business. But when I started poking questions at Will, why do you do this? Tell me about this. And all of a sudden, Will pulls out a full set of financials. He starts running through the financials with me, and he's explaining how, Kurt, I'm the one that's responsible for the financial review. I do it with April. We get assistance. David's not as involved in this as I am. And I'm sitting here and I'm picking up on all this. Again, it just added to my convictions, because now I'm sitting there and I'm getting proof positive that what David's telling me is like the gospel. And I had no reason to doubt him. But listen, you do enough deal activity and you realize that people tell you what you want to hear. Right? That's the nature of, especially when there's representation. And so here I am having this unfiltered conversation, and I'm looking at it the whole time, and I'm just watching Will and how he's answering these questions. I'm like, man, this guy knows this business inside and out. built.
You got it. 100%. So really that was Will's one concern was just simply the level of trust. And I think spending the time that Kurt spent with him one-on-one was huge. And it's irreplaceable because that allowed Will to bond with Kurt and to have that understanding that you just get to know somebody and you open up and you share personal stories and things like that. So that I felt was a huge plus in just there not being this unknown buyer, this unknown partner. Kurt's a landscaper. He's just like us. We're kind of a tight-knit group, us landscape guys. You know, I mean, we understand. It's like you can look at a landscaper and be like, yeah, he's tried and true. So, Frank comes from the corporate world. So Frank comes from a bigger billion-dollar company to where he ran sales, he ran and trained sales teams. He went and got his certification in leadership coaching and training through John Maxwell Leadership. Frank was trying to kind of systemize the sales. We didn't have HubSpot. We didn't have, a lot of the tracking and the formulas and things. So when I shared it with Frank, he was just ready from go. He understands the upside of bringing in the equity from the sales perspective simply because you're going to find ways to lower your indirects. And, our consultants always tell us the lowest cost provider wins the market. And that's not the lowest price, the lowest cost. So if you can run the business very efficiently from a cost standpoint, you can still make your 45, 50% gross margin, but you're going to put out a price that's going to be competitive to the marketplace. So Frank understands from the sales perspective that, hey, with this partnership, we can get more buying power. We can get potential lower insurance costs. He's been in business long enough to understand the massaging of things from the numbers standpoint and an indirect standpoint to be able to say, hey, this is going to help me boost sales. And it's going to allow us to go after the big $1 million plus portfolio accounts because now David doesn't have to come out and go to the bank and get a loan to buy 5 new trucks or to staff. Now there's a comfort level in the buying power that we have and the backing that we have. He was excited from the beginning. There was no talking Frank into it. He was an advocate from day one.
So here we are. We're sitting on 9th of January. Our hearts go out to all the challenges within California with the fires right now. But what does it look like going into 2025?
The timing of all this is just uncanny. We're sitting here on a fresh pool of capital. We have successfully entered Florida within 30 days of our own closing and origination of that new capital source. I think it's a surprise for everybody that we were able to synchronize all of it to work out exactly the way that it has. Where we're going from here, let's start with where Bland as a organization as a whole, why did we need a bigger partner? Our action plan is that we are going into all of the major MSAs throughout the southeastern United States that have populations of, let's just say, give or take 750,000 to 1 million people and larger. We're going to do that by identifying strategic opportunities with people like David that are growth-minded, that have built growth-minded companies, that have growth-minded teams. We're going to make strategic acquisitions of those companies and allow the sellers to participate as a future equity participant by rolling forward proceeds if they choose to do so. We're pretty unique in the sense that we don't require an earnout. David does not have a performance earnout that he's tied to. I've never done that with anybody. I did it the first deal we did. I have to recant that. We did do that the first deal. It was a mistake because it doesn't align the seller with the long-term objectives of the buyer. It creates that short-term paralysis in which our concerns are differently aligned. And so being that we now have this source of capital, we have the structure we have, we can allow the equity roll forward from the sellers in these strategically positioned businesses. We're going to be executing what's called a buy, build, bolt-on model. It's not called that. We made it up.
Sounds good, though.
I don't know if that exists in a business administration class, right? But we've kind of coined that phrase internally, buy, build, bolt on. And that is we make an initial strategic investment with David as an example. We then will leverage David's relationship. So David is going through a metamorphosis right now, kind of, if you will, like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon, and that his role is changing. His role is changing, and he's shedding a lot of the things that I would say are burdensome. He doesn't have to worry about cash flow. He doesn't have to worry about taxation. He doesn't have to worry about administration and all of the things. At the same time, we're less dependent on some of the outside resources. So we will lower the cost model that is necessary to be able to pursue those larger opportunities. And so we will go aggressively after organic growth in those markets. And so like David sent me a beautiful picture today of a table in Jacksonville, Florida, covered in landscaping marketing swag at the office of a prospective major customer, where they were already in there doing, a dog and pony show, if you will, lunch and learn, whatever you want to call it. He and Frank, we will go after the larger potential opportunities that they've not been able to pursue. We will focus on very much an execution, blocking and tackling. And I think, Robert, you've known me long enough and know my culture of our business long enough. There's no shiny objects here. It's all about blocking and tackling. We don't get distracted by a lot of the shiny objects that are out there.
Yeah.
We will simplify, we will block and tackle, we will sell, we will perform, we will operate. David and I have talked a lot in the past 72 hours about some very clear goals of what we want to achieve in 2025 insofar as revenue growth, so that we can then be ready to do greenfield startups in surrounding peripheral communities. And so, for example, going into Southeast Georgia, going further down into Florida, we will be doing that through a combination of organic sales efforts. David and Frank, as a team, you put them in front of a prospective customer with the resources that we can bring and the team that will leads, we can go make magic happen. And we can back that magic up. Whereas in the past, David would have been saying, well, if I put that aggressive price on there, then I've got to go come up with that other $500,000 of capital to pay for the necessary resources. We don't have that burden any longer. David and I will be working closely to cultivate add-on opportunities. Koehn Outdoor will become They have become bland. We will do brand change sometime towards the end of this production season. We don't get in a hurry about that. I don't want to go rebrand all the vehicles right now. We'll leave that well enough alone. But things like contracts and paychecks and stuff like that had to change on day one. So the secret's been out of the bag. We're doing our press releases next week. Honestly, this conversation with you is the first public interaction that we've had with anybody about this.
Well, thank you.
So thanks for giving us the chance to come in here and tell the story. Then once it's all public information, we fully expect there's going to be a surge of people that are people like David, that David knows and that David has built friendly relationships with, people that he has gone through the growing pains of growing your business with, that we want to talk to. And we think that there's an ample number of them that will want to talk with us. And then share with them this story of how, here's what we can bring to bear if you're in one of these strategic markets that we want to get into. We can pay you a very competitive, if not best price out there right now for the business. We can allow the seller to do an equity roll forward. We can be very creative in what that means. That's a kind of a bespoke thing of how you approach that on each situation, but we have those resources now. So we will then continue to do these strategic investments like this one into these other markets. But in Florida and in South Georgia, we will start looking for add-on opportunities. And these add-on opportunities, they don't need to be as large as Koehn. They could be a $3 to $5 million company that it may have a little bit of construction sprinkled in there, because we've got our flagship of what we need as the strategic entry into the market. And so if we need to go pick up some other businesses, and let's say hypothetically that, there's a good business in St. Augustine, it doesn't check all the boxes of what we want, but it checks half of them, but yet it's strategically positioned. There's a seller that has like mentality, or maybe they want to exit. Of the 8 businesses we bought from 9 owners, David and Mark Michelle are the only 2 owners that have stayed with us. So I have successfully retired 7 founders of businesses. Okay. And most of those folks have retired within 30 days of closing. Some of them have retired the day of closing. And so the flexibility that we have there, this is where, go back to David and Kurt have a lot in common. I, for the past decade plus, have been so hedgehog focused on building what we've built. I haven't been out what I'd call working the circuit of going to the different conferences. Like when I came to Thought Leaders Retreat last year, I think I told you, Robert, that was the first public national scale event that I had done in over a decade.
Yeah, no, and we appreciated you being there. You were well received.
It was a great conference. And I want to come back this year.
Oh.
And so what David and I have been talking about, at first it's like, well, David, we're not going to keep doing that kind of stuff. But then I said, we kind of stepped back and we said, wait a second, David's got a ton of relationships out there. He's got people that he's been getting to know for a decade, that they've been through the same growing pains he has. They want to talk about this stuff. So we're going to encourage David to continue doing that kind of stuff. And this is where, Joe and Matt well enough to know that neither one of them wants to go to conferences. I mean, we can drag them, right? But these guys want to be, focused on their work. They want to be at home with their families. They have young children. They're not sitting here saying, well, send me to another conference. I enjoy that. And I used to do a lot of it. And I'm reasonably good at going to those things and meeting people. But what I don't have is, honestly, as I'm getting older and been doing this as long as I have, a lot of my relationships are more with people that have been doing it a lot longer. The companies that are more similar to Bland than to Koehn, for example, age-wise and size-wise. And so David brings a unique element in the sense that he knows a lot of these folks. And so he and I were just talking about this yesterday. We haven't attended I can't tell you the last time. I think it was 2009. I can tell you. 2009 was the last time that anybody from my team, other than a few people, went in Charlotte this year. 2009 is the last time that we had a concerted participation in Elevate. We're going to go to Elevate this upcoming year. And David and I are going to go together, and we're going to take some more people with us. And we're going to keep leveraging the dynamic personality that David has as a landscaper. We're going to let him keep running with that. Go be our ambassador in these groups that we haven't necessarily been exposed to as much because we've been kind of in this hedgehog, blinders on thing. And Manish Chola, our managing partner, when we brought David up during an interview process just so he could meet our team and they could meet him right as we were trying to work out the finer details. This was once we had selected ComVest. Interesting, we hadn't closed with ComVest yet, so that even adds to the whole thing. We were under an agreement with ComVest that had to go through a 30-day cooling off period where the FTC had to make sure there was no...
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Well, when private equity firms are of a certain size and the deal they're doing is of a certain size, then there's a requirement that they have to go through an antitrust, I think it's called HRS. Right. It's basically an antitrust, anti-monopoly type process where if you don't hear anything in 30 days, you're clear. But the FTC has 30 days to say, we're not going to allow this deal to close. Okay. Hear about it on the news with bigger companies when deals get disrupted because they didn't pass that test, right? It's silly to think that a deal like ours would have been involved in that, but lo and behold, we were. And so we were sitting here, in this process of waiting for our deal to be able to close and bringing David in. And Manish said after David left the meeting, I'd buy from that guy. I don't know. I understand he's not selling me landscape services, but I like David. That's a guy I'd want to buy from.
That's a nice vote for confidence.
I looked at him and I said, well, Manish, that's good because we're buying his business. As that took place, as David and I've been talking these past few days, he has a passion to go out there and tell this story. You've seen it as we're sitting here talking today. Get us past this integration process. And for us, we're a rip the Band-Aid off integrator. We don't pussyfoot around and drag along and, make everybody feel good about it. We do it. We tell them up front, it will be painful, but it's going to only take us 60 to 90 days. We'll be done with all this by then. And so we got to get through that period. We're this deep in it right now. Now that my partners are in West Palm Beach, Florida, I've already got 2 upcoming trips planned to Florida, one for a board meeting where I'm going to be able to pair that with a meeting with David and going out I want to do like a little customer interaction thing, let the CEO come in and say hey to you to prove that what David's told you is legitimate, right? And then make it so that between David's personality and my personality and the team that supports this entire organization, go leverage that and go buy into these other strategic markets, buy more businesses in Florida. We're going to grow Bland Landscaping by 300 to 400% over the next 3 to 5 years.
That's exciting.
And we've got a roadmap to get there. It sounds tough, right? 300 to 400% growth. That just sounds crazy. We've done more than that over the last 7. And so I had to break this down to my own staff. With the pro forma of having David in the mix now, we're banging right on $100 million. We're 93% plus commercial, 93% plus recurring revenue. And we will leverage the platform that we have built and do more deals like this one while adding on to this one, and we plan to do this in Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, but there's a lot less big markets in South Carolina. We're already working in both ends of South Carolina. We're opening a branch right now in Rock Hill, South Carolina. We're working in Myrtle Beach, planning to open a branch there this year. So we'll continue all these organic initiatives that we've been doing. We'll continue the greenfield initiatives that we've been doing. And with David's help, we're going to start building more presence. And as I explained to him when I first pitched this idea to him, we'll bring a hellacious force from the north to the south. What I need for them to do is to bring a similar force from the south to the north. And our goal is to unify these forces together somewhere around Hilton Head, Charleston area. We're going to work up the entire coast, down the entire coast. We're going to work all the major interstates. We're going to hit all these MSAs. I don't want to go north of DC. Not to say it won't happen, but that's just not, I get enough headaches from snow when it happens like tomorrow. But I'm not a secretive person about it. I'm very open about it. I mean, sitting here saying it like some people would say, wow, you're telling everybody what you're going to do. Hell, I've been telling everybody what I'm going to do for 10 years.
Projecting where you want to go, can help. So when you hear that, David, I mean, how does it make you feel in terms of what that vision looks like? I mean, you're both visionaries. I mean, is that inspiring? Is that intimidating?
No, I mean, it's 100% inspiring to me. I truly believe that if you ask, believe, you shall receive. So I think that you have to speak it out there into existence, and you've got to approach it with confidence and just truly take the ball and run with it. The amount of confidence, the plan that they've built, I think in the geographical regions that we've discussed, I think I have relationships in a lot of those regions. I've been holding back, making calls and getting involved in some interactions with other owners that I know just to see what options are out there. So it's exciting for me because I've always been more of the sales and business builder. When the consultants came in and washed out some of the bad eggs, redid the structure, and they learned who I was, they very quickly looked at me and looked at Will and said, Will's your guy to do the operations. You're the guy that needs to get out there and sell some work. That was another reason how we went from $5 million at a split. I mean, when you think about it, in like a 5-year span, we were literally $1.5 million in reoccurring and $3 million in construction. And in a 5-year span, we flipped that to $10 million in sales, all landscape management. So, anybody listening to this who wants to call me and say, well, David, how did you go from 5 million to 10 million in 4 years? Call me and let's talk about it. Maybe I can help get you there, just like Kurt did for me, to where it's like, hey, you're at 3 million now. Let me coach you to 5, and then we'll come in and maybe we can talk to you about acquiring you. You're in a good market or whatever that looks like. I'm looking forward to getting out into the network of Grow Group and NALP and all of these guys. I've known Marty Grunder for years. So I want to get out there, but now I'm in a different mindset. They always say you got to kind of find your why. And for other owners who've been through what I've been through in this stage, you have to find your new purpose and your new drive. And not to say that my purpose or my drive is not what it used to be. It's still building the Northeast region. But now I have such a bigger pond to fish in. Before I'm fishing in a small pond with just bass. Well, hell, now we're deep sea fishing now, baby.
I love it. Yeah, both look forward to seeing you at our Thought Leader Retreat in Denver, the end of Denver. We're also sponsoring Elevate, so it'll be obviously great to see you both out there. If there are people out there that are genuinely interested to find out about your journey, learning from you how to scale the business, I mean, what's the best way to do that?
I would say LinkedIn. I mean, I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn. Just David Koehn, Koehn, connect, and we can kind of start from there. I guess as soon as all the press releases are in, we'll work on refacing some of the media. We are working behind the scenes right now on some content. We had a videographer at our closing. We've got some things that we're working on there. I think a lot of people in this industry so many people have asked me for years to partner with them or to acquire us, and I've constantly said, no, I'm not interested. No, I'm not interested. I certainly think that there's going to be some interest as to, well, David, why Bland? After all these years, you saying, no, you're taking this thing to a platform, you're growing it, you're going to, your goal was 25 million, whatever the case may be. I think that there'll be some curiosity there around why I decided to make this move and this shift. So I'd be glad to share that story and talk about the next steps of joining the team, man. Let's get it going. Let's build this thing and make something special.
Any parting words, Kurt, before we finish up?
I'll reemphasize how excited we are about having this opportunity to work with David and to work with his entire team. I want to give you, Robert, a sincere thank you for letting us come on here and tell this story. I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing at Wilson 360. This hasn't come up, but I will say, you guys help us a lot. The work that you've done with our account managers and with our salespeople, that will continue. David's going to get the opportunity to work with your team through the ongoing work that we do together. The future in this industry is just limitless. I sent out this little email that just popped in my head the other day I sent it to my employees 2 days ago. First thing I'd really communicated since the new year. And I quoted Buzz Lightyear. And I heard this. Toy Story came out in 1995. I graduated high school in 1993. So I did not watch Toy Story as a kid. Okay, I'll tell you that. But the term infinity and beyond, it's a redundant term, right? Infinity and beyond. If infinity is infinite, then what is beyond infinity, right? And when I think about where we're heading right now, I think about the people that are on our team that have been part of this journey. We are looking at an infinite potential in the future, and we plan to go beyond it. I had a real candid conversation with members of my team that I've been through 2 rounds of private equity recap now, more than ever. The reason I am here are the people. It's because of the people like David. It's the people like Will Cruz. It's the people like Joe Ritchie. It's the people like Tyner and Adam. And the entire team. Early in 2024, we were having a meeting, and I think you might have been facilitating the meeting when we had a production manager training. One of my production managers, a fellow named Jacob Ortiz, he pulled me to the side afterwards and he said, Kurt, I started here as an assistant crew leader. I've grown up through the business. I'm now a production manager. And I got to tell you, he said, I'm so fired up about the stuff that we're doing as a business and just hearing about and having everybody here together and hearing about what's happening in all the regions. He's like, I'm so fired up by this. He said, I want to share a story with you. And he said, I'd like to tell you that, my family, most of them have left New York and moved to St. Augustine, Florida. And he said, so my aunt and my cousins and, my extended family, that's where they all live. He said, so my wife and I go down there to visit several times a year. He said, I have a goal, a professional goal, that when my kids are out of high school, that my wife and I are going to move to St. Augustine and I'm going to join a landscape company down there. And I said to him, well, Jacob, this was before David and I had a long-term conversation going on. This is before we had a sincere, let's do it now conversation. I looked at Jacob and I said, Jacob, I don't want to speak prematurely. I said, but when the time comes for you to do that, I hope to be able to look at you and say, well, don't worry, we've got a home for you. And we may have to time it so that the right position is ready for you. But I promise you, if you commit to me the way that you already have for a long time, if you commit to me long term that you want to be in Jacksonville or you want to be in St. Augustine or you want to be somewhere down there near your family, I'll find a way. And I've got a friend in Jacksonville who one day I might do a deal with. Well, about 3 or 4 months after that conversation is when David and I gained real traction in saying, let's do this now. And so when we were preparing to go down to the closing, we did something we'd never done. And I reached out to Jacob. I first reached out to Jacob's boss to make sure it was okay, because I do respect the rank and order of the company. And I reached out through Jacob's boss to Jacob. And I said, Jacob, we'd like to have you join us in Jacksonville, Florida for upcoming closing. And Jacob was surprised. He's a production manager. He's not an associate branch manager or branch manager, but he was really surprised that he was going to be invited to do this. So he chose to drive. He drove down there. And so that night we had a pre-closing dinner that David recommended, a nice little seafood spot with a nice view. And we brought the teams together, my executive team that traveled down there and David's executive team. We sat there and had fried gator tail bites and stuff like that with one another, watching the sunset. And as we're driving there, Jacob said to me, he's like, Kurt, I can't believe I'm here. I said, why is that? He said, he said, this whole drive down here, I was thinking about this fact that it wasn't that long ago that you and I had this conversation that I wanted to move to Florida one day. And he's like, my kids are only 11 years old, 9 or 10 years old, whatever. He's like, that's still 7 years away, 8 years away. He's like, and here I am helping be part of a closing. He's like, I don't even know what this involves. And I was like, listen, just, be prepared to make people feel good. Be prepared to talk to people, tell them your story, how you came in here as an inexperienced guy that has grown up through the ranks and you see a future here. Just tell them your story. That's all I ask you to do. Just if they ask, make them feel good. And so afterwards, and he did a great job. And then afterwards, yesterday, I was having a conversation. So, a month has lapsed. I was having a conversation with his boss. and his boss is a guy named Dustin that just was promoted to branch manager. Dustin also started with me 7 years ago as a crew leader in training, became a crew leader, became a production manager, became an associate branch manager, and just got promoted to branch manager last month. And so I called Dustin just to have a little, check in with him. It was his 7-year anniversary with the company. I said, hey, we really enjoyed Jacob coming with us to Jacksonville. And I really sincerely hope that he understands that we will have an office in St. Augustine when he's ready to move down there. I will work with him to find the right home there. I said, I appreciate you letting us burden your branch by taking him for a couple days. And Dustin said to me, he said, Kurt, you don't have any idea how positive of an impact that had. He's like, Jacob's more fired up than I've ever seen him. He's like, this guy's always been a grinder and a go-getter, but like he is like on fire. Like he's telling everybody about what he saw in Florida. He's telling everybody about what a special experience it was to be part of this closing and how he couldn't believe that he was trusted enough to be there. And like, he's like, he just hasn't quit stopping about it. And he's talking about it in like just such a positive way. And Robert, that's what we're trying to do. Like, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to inspire people to believe that what we're building is a little bit different. We're not copying anybody else's playbook. We're doing something really authentic. My guiding principle in these decisions is our state's motto, esse quam videri, which in Latin translates to be rather than to seem. And I'm a firm believer that the world oftentimes lacks authenticity in large businesses. And as we transition from a medium business to a large business and we go through this journey, preserving that authenticity is what matters more than anything to me. It's what brought David and I together. It's what motivates people like Dustin. It's what motivates everybody on our team, in my opinion, right? I preach this to my team. Be authentic with people. You don't have to say yes. You don't always have to have the answer, but you got to be authentic. I firmly believe that if we just keep doing that, more of these stories will unfold. We'll continue to, broaden the impact that this has. We're in the process right now of working with our partners to figure out what our expanded long-term incentive program looks like. And we're having what I think is a meaningful impact on people's careers that choose to align with us and want to be in the landscape industry. And we'll keep doing that. And if we keep doing it, and we keep being honest with people and we keep upholding the promises that we make, I think we'll keep being successful. We fortunately have the resources to back it up, but it's just not rocket science. Like David said, we're blue collar guys. We're landscapers. When we were going through this process, my wife told me, she said, you need to upgrade your wardrobe. And my wife's a hell of a lot smarter professional than I am. I was like, what do you mean barefooted doesn't cut it? Like, I'm not a dressy guy, And she's like, no, we got to get you some more jackets. You're going to be sitting in all these meetings. And so she helped me pick out about half a dozen nice jackets to wear to business meetings. And the one that I love the most and the one I paid the most for is this jacket that she got for me from Italy that the collar is made of denim. And so it's a business jacket, but I call it my blue collar business coat. Right?
There you go. I love it.
And
Awesome.
If we keep thinking that way and we keep telling ourselves and others that we are landscapers first, we know a little bit about finance. I've learned a little bit about private equity by doing this, but I'm still a landscaper and I would die a landscaper. And I think that authenticity resonates with people. I thank you for letting us tell this story. Anybody that has any questions about it, I'm always willing to talk. And like David, LinkedIn is the best place to find me. Look forward to seeing you, Robert, in Denver, if not before. Thank you again, sir.
Well, thank you, guys. I think that story about Jacob just sums up that authenticity, just how you love to take care of people. Anytime I've seen you talking, it's always been down to earth, and I love that about you and your company. And maybe we can get a headshot of you with your jacket on with the blue collar. That'd be awesome. Well, thank you, guys. I know this has been way longer session than normal, but I think this has been amazing in terms of the stories, the passion. I'm excited about what's ahead of you. I look forward to catching up with you both at future events, and we'll take it from there. So thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, you too. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
All right. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to the Commercial Landscaper Podcast. I'm Robert Clinky-Beard, and I hope today's insights inspire you to push yourself beyond your limits, lead with purpose, and scale your business to new heights. Don't forget to check out our new digital online courses and training programs on the Wilson 360 website, and join the Boss Business Management Software community to optimize your business like never before. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe on YouTube, share it with your network. Let's grow. Let's transform the industry together. Until next time, stay inspired and keep striving for greatness. Cheers, everyone.